Welcome everybody to today's Kubernetes office hours, where we answer your user questions live on the air with our esteemed panel of experts. You can find us on the Pound office hours on Slack, on Kubernetes Slack, and check the topic for the URL for the information. Now, before we begin, let's start by introducing ourselves in this elaborate set we built for this week. Who's going first? Guy, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Guy. I'm one of the leads of SIG scaling and also a principal software engineer at Skyscanner.
All right, I guess I'll go then, since we'll do it in kind of line order. My name is David Mackay. I'm a developer advocate at Equinix Merrill and co-host of the Kubernetes office hours.
Hello, my name is Borko. A while ago, I got help here learning Kubernetes, so I'm trying to give back and pass it along.
Hi, my name is Yogi. I'm a solutions engineer at VMware, and I work in Singapore and around the region in APJ. So happy to be here, contributing back to the community.
Hi, everyone. My name is Archie. I'm CNCF ambassador from Canada, working at Google Cloud. Happy to be here, see all friends and Kubernetes passionate people.
All you know.
Hey, I'm Noam. I mostly hang around in the Rock Code Discord community and mostly interested on cloud native stuff and just trying to help others.
Gotcha, everyone. And my name is Dan Popindre. I'm the director of open source ecosystem and community. I work on a CNCF project called Falco. So before we start, here are the ground rules. This is a Kubernetes event, so the CNCF code of conduct is in effect. So please be excellent to one another. This is a judgment-free zone, so everyone had to start from somewhere. So please help out your buddy, like Darko. Somebody helped out Darko. Now Darko's on the panel. You see how this works? Everybody had to start from somewhere. Help someone, and let's be supportive of one another in the channel and in life. While we do our best to answer your questions, the panel doesn't have access to your cluster, right? We're not going to live debug your cluster. We will do our best to get you moving and down to the next step. So, and also kind of some house cleaning for you all is normally we provide shirts from the CNCF where the CNCF is replenishing its inventory, so we will give you a shout out in our undying devotion for going here. So, panelists, you're encouraged to expand on answers with your experience and pro tips. Audience, you can help by pasting in URLs to official docs, blogs, or anything that might be relevant to the topic at hand. So please post your questions, etc., on discuss.kubernetes.io. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward. So again, this panel is made entirely of volunteers. So if you want to rotate in, please let us know. We love to have new people rotate in and out. So each month we want to go through a brief moment to thank a member of the office hours volunteers for their continued effort and support for this program. Of course, he's a diva and didn't show up today, but anyway, no, all jokes aside, Puya, if you all know Puya from Giant Swarm, just an awesome, wonderful human being. And so he couldn't make it today, but we want to thank you for all your contributions to the Kubernetes community. With that said, let's get started, panel. You pumped? Yogi, I see you over there. I see you're pumped right now. All right, good.
Absolutely.
We removed Archie's banner. Life is good. All right, so let's get started. Here's our first question. David, do you want to take the first question? You want me to get it?
Sure, I'll go for it. Why not?
And by the way, David and I have a truce today. It's the office hours truce of every month, so we're no longer enemies today. I just want to let you all know. So go ahead, David.
I mean, we're still enemies. We're just going to behave. All right, our first question comes from the Discord. Discuss Discord. And the question is it possible to have a Kubernetes cluster where the control plane or any nodes have different container runtimes installed? Has anyone experimented with different container runtimes across different nodes in their cluster? All right. I've tried it. So it works. Actually, I don't think the Kubernetes particularly minds what the CRI is on each of your nodes. The kubelet just spawns the containers. So I have experimented with a mix of Docker and Containerd, and things seem to work. I did not run it for long, so I can't tell you if it is a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. Typically, I would probably say it is bad because of a few operational concerns of having to maintain and understand deeply two container runtimes. But in theory, there's nothing stopping you doing that. You may be in a position, I guess, where you've got Docker and you want to move to Containerd, and spinning up new node pools would be a good way to do that as a bridge and then migrate everything over. No one else has tried it?
I think I have a long time ago, but I can't remember if it's the whole cluster or just like a certain number of nodes. So that's why I didn't want to, I can't remember the specifics.
Okay.
I want to ask the obvious question that I ask every time we get one of these, like, hey, I want to, like, why? The question is, why would you have container runtime, like, of different sort? Why would you want to kind of have a different support model for, like, there's benefits obviously to, like, you know, cryo or Containerd, excuse me, like in terms of efficiencies. Like I've seen direct efficiencies from different container runtimes. Is it because, you know, you're working through like a migration of some sort and you kind of like are stuck with, you know, either maybe a previous like Docker and you want to move to Containerd, and, you know, I don't know. I kind of want to ask that follow-up question of why.
I think migration will be the main one for a majority of people. Especially going from something to Containerd. And I think another one could be just high performance computing. You may find that people want a certain node pool with a certain CRI that maybe responds better or works better in that kind of environment.
Yeah, a couple of other use cases, we have support for the VMs, right? You can use Kubernetes, I think, project, which allows you to spin up VMs. On the Kubernetes cluster. So potentially you would like to mix VMs and containers. That would be one use case. And Google has a project gvisor, for example. Maybe you'll want to have some containers that are running as gvisor containers, like more secure. And like maybe the rest will be running Containerd by default, for example. So yeah, potential use cases are there, but I don't see a lot of people doing it these days. Like,
yeah, that's I was just gonna bring up gvisor, and that was like exactly, I couldn't remember, like I was playing around with gvisor one time and I couldn't remember if I just replaced all the nodes or not. That was exactly what I was looking into.
Archie, without that banner, your game is on stellar this week already, dude. Nice work. All right. Anything else on this before we move on to the next question, panel? Wonderful. All right, so here's the next question. How can I set up role or cluster role to deny access to certain resources? For instance, role or deny access to certain pods in specific namespace.
Is it an RBAC question or?
It's an RBAC question, yeah.
So maybe someone can go into this in a bit more detail, but I'll try and expand the question a little bit. Typically, I think most of us use RBAC as a way to assign capabilities, permissions to users, groups, etc. But it sounds like they're trying to do an invert here and actually explicitly deny access for a role or cluster role. I guess just by not including the permission, it would be a deny. Is it too easy?
Yeah, well, I mean, the verb would be the deny, and you just define the namespace as one of the resource names, right? Like, so this is just I don't think this is, I think maybe we might be over engineering it if it's just where it's this seems like a common, you know, deny for that specific namespace or everything beyond that.
I missed a bit of the question. Okay, so they actually want to do this to deny only on certain resources. So they want like role or cluster role to have the ability to create, update, and delete, but not certain resources. Okay, that makes it a bit trickier.
Yeah, that.
So, I mean, maybe the specifics matter, but you can have cluster roles that are then assigned via role bindings and their namespace. So, but yeah, but that wouldn't be, again, that wouldn't be specifically denying.
Yeah, that's right. The Kubernetes RBAC doesn't have a default, like explicit deny, like you see in Cloud IAM. So by default, everything is denied unless you add a role that or cluster role that allows it.
Okay, so it sounds like if they want to be able to deny access to certain pods in a specific namespace, they probably just want to avoid cluster roles altogether. Focus on namespace roles. And then within the namespace, is there ability to block access on certain resources? Could they do that with a admission controller, perhaps?
I think you can add a resource name field in the RBAC thing, but I don't know how well it really affects. Like with secrets, you can actually say you can get a specific secret, like the role is only allowed to access a specific secret or a specific. But putting in a pod name seems kind of counterintuitive because the name is like dynamic, right? If it's created by a deployment, so probably a deployment name. I haven't really tried it, but it seems like an interesting use case.
Yeah, could be. I mean, I wasn't aware about this one actually. ABAC, attribute-based access control. This is like going further from role-based access control. So it's going by per attribute basis. So that could be an interesting thing to look at. Maybe, just maybe, what they are actually trying to do is, it may not be pod, but maybe because of some custom resources. So very specifically on any sort of new custom resources, they might be trying to set up like a deny by default. So, I mean, typically in case of RBAC, it's deny by default, right? Unless you've authorized. Like if the user has not been given any role binding, then it would be denied anyway, unless they've gotten that permission through a role binding, either cluster level or namespace level.
We have any type of reference we can send to what you're talking about that we can put in channel just to respond to that, Yogi? And welcome, Mario. Mario, you want to introduce yourself to the panel?
Hello. Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Apologies for being late. I've got my KubeCon San Diego shirt on, so I came somewhat prepared, just way late. I am Mario Loria. I currently work for Carta-X, a financial services company. I am everything SRE, everything cloud infrastructure. I love networking and auto scaling and some of the more intricate topics around resiliency, availability, and security. I just became triple certified, just got my CKS knocked out about like 10, 15 days ago. So very happy about that. I've also had the pleasure to party with at least one of the people in this this current call this past weekend in my hometown. So had a great time. Happy to be here. You've probably seen me before. I've done a bad job of answering questions on this office hours many times. So great to be here.
Recently engaged as well. So congratulations to Mario Loria.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So question I'm going to alternate from questions to HackMD to ones in the channel. Next question here is, hi team, how to Kubernetes hardware, Kelsey Hightower, installation on VMware Workstation 16. Let me take a first stab at this. I mean, you're looking at nodes. There's a specific amount of nodes that are being asked, like the underlying control plane nodes, and then the nodes themselves from an application perspective. I think it asks for like 6, I believe, if I remember correctly. And so my question is, again, I ask the why questions a lot, and I apologize. That's kind of my MO. I understand you could probably do it at a lesser scale, maybe the one control plane and one application if you want to kind of understand how to understand the underlying bits and understand system MD and understand how to do the certificates and aspects of this. But I think the question is, if somebody probably wants to set up a lab doing the hard way on their local laptop, does anybody have any suggestions here?
I did it once, and then I sort of went on to do it via Vagrant on not Workstation, but Fusion, but same thing. I mean, I had a Mac, so I did it on Fusion, and I used Vagrant for it. And it's fairly simple. I think I do have a GitHub repo where the Vagrant files are kept, so people can actually refer. It's essentially going through the same thing, going through all the commands. But yeah, I mean, set it up once and then you've learned it, and then yeah, you can always use it. But again, like today, if I have to do a Kubernetes cluster, I'll just use a Minikube or like Kind, one of those two things.
Or a K3S or something, which is like
Okay,
even less.
K3S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think this person probably wants to understand the bits aspect of it. So I would say I wouldn't do it at the scale the hard way does it, like having, like, I think it asks for, X amount of nodes and all of that fun stuff. I think you could do it on a one-to-one basis, right? Just to understand how these things are interacting. But that's, again, my personal opinion on it. All right, I'm going to go back to our precious, unless anybody else in the panel has any other thoughts here. Okay, question. I have created few pods in different namespaces. When I run a curl command from web client and namespace, my app aren't returning any results. But web client in app T1 is working fine. The default pod should be able to access the same cluster, but why is this not working as expected?
So I put this question in, even though I think it's going to be tricky for us to answer, but the kind of TLDR here is they have pods in different namespaces and they're trying to curl the pod IP across the namespace and it is being denied. So I wondered if we could have a conversation about what things could affect that within the cluster.
Could be a network policy.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good check.
That's the first one that comes to my mind. Sorry, is this question on the discuss or where was this question?
It's in the HackMD and from, sorry, I need to go pop.
Yeah, go ahead. It's in the HackMD, yeah.
It's in the HackMD. It was asked on the Discuss forums. They're execing into a pod in the namespace my app. They're trying to curl a pod in the namespace app team 1. It's getting denied. Do we want to give the 30-second pitch of how network policies work?
Yeah, so typically, like in a network policy, you would set up a rule for egress or ingress. So you need to check both sides. So on the side where you are actually executing curl from, you need to make sure that there is egress allowing you to go out. The way you sort of define the egress and ingress rule is using pod selection labels. You could confine it to certain specific labels, or you can keep it fairly open. And you do it on both sides. You do it on your source as well as the destination or the target namespace. So yeah, that is the first thing I would check if there's a network policy defined on either sides.
That's a pretty solid description of network policies. Well done.
Yogi, our anchor, just totally bringing us legitimacy to this panel today. Awesome.
I just want to add, like, I think potentially for the future use case, if you want to get like better visibility of your network policies and what talking to what, if you switch to something like Cilium with eDPF, there is a project Hubble where you can actually see how pods talking to each other. And they also have a nice tool which is called Cilium Editor, where you can actually configure your network policies, and you can see, you can test them before applying them, for example, and stuff like that. So I'll share those two projects in the Slack channel.
Yeah, Hubble is like a superpower in Kubernetes. Such a great tool.
Shameless plug. Sysdig also allows for network policies to be edited there. I just want to throw that out there, and I'll also put that in the link as well. All righty. We are nailing it this week, you all. I'm going back to the channel for questions here. There is a question from Steve Yaki. Good to see you, Steve. Always a pleasure. When running a cluster with both internal and external workloads, public APIs, private APIs, what are best practices around keeping things secure around those boundaries, especially around securing ingress?
So network policies? I think like network policies is one of the first things I think about here. It depends on the boundaries. It depends on where traffic is traversing, right? If you're traversing VPCs, you're going to be more concerned with security groups. If you're traversing something else, like you're going to be concerned with whatever security layers and implementation of ACLs are there. Dialing in your CNI. If you're using a service mesh, that's another kind of maybe layer to consider. I think you really have to look at the end-to-end flow of traffic, right? So, and what applications are using what resources? So what APIs are being accessed? How are they being accessed? And trying to think in a zero trust model, like least privilege model with everything you do. So there's a lot of different solutions out there that help you get visibility into that. Hubble is a great example of that. And I know Sysdig has some great things too, like we were saying. So I think you just have to consider everything when it relates to where your traffic is going, where your data is flowing, and the systems intermediate to that, right? That it might be hopping through, how it's being accessed. Even things like having public DNS zones, right? Where you might want to actually private DNS zones, right? So all that has to be considered. I've seen systems that said, you know, where we want our inner four walls, but what they actually did is the Nginx ingress was public to the world. It just had a deny list in it. So it blocked non-VPN addresses, right? Well, technically that's still available to the world. So there's fun things called 0 days. And if there's something that happens with Nginx and there's a 0 day that comes out and there's let's say a buffer overflow that can be caused, right? That can still be executed, more or less depending on what you're allowing, right? So I think the ways that people try to solve this are a little bit out of bounds. An allow list, deny list seems like the go-to, but I think you have to think a little bit deeper about what's actually happening in your systems and really the risk for your company. So I work in financial services, so we think about it a lot differently. We have SEC and FINRA and regulations like that. You really have to look at like, what do we care about? What is the key thing? What about our data do we need to make sure is either within our four walls or managed, or how do we feel comfortable using a third-party vendor? So there's a lot of pieces there. Hopefully I kind of answered this person's question. I hope they weren't looking for anything too specific.
All righty. So let me go back to the channel here because I think we're out of HackMD.
We have one more question from.
Oh, you want to get that?
Carl Tardick,
Good.
yeah.
Go ahead, bud.
Carl asks, in traditional infrastructure, we would use Squid for FQDN outbound ACL restrictions. What would you use in a full CNCF infra to replace Squid? I'm going to let Noel jump in because I see you've got 2 replies, but I've not expanded them. Do you want to take that?
Sure. I assume I understood the question right. So it's mostly basic about having like domain-based egress filters rather than using IP addresses. I assume my understanding is right. If the understanding is right, Cilium seems to have support for domain-based egress filtering. Like you can even like do star or like wildcards and all. And I put a link in the chat about the page that describes the document, has the documentation.
All right. So
Cilium's doing great stuff, and they do. I just want to throw a plug out for them. On Fridays, I think every other Friday or something, they do a really good talk on eVPF and some overall discussions on Cilium. I think it's a really good stream. If you haven't checked it out, it's called Echo.
Echo is great.
Actually have. Yeah, like I think the approach we've discussed was using the Cilium, right? The FQDN policies. Is that what I think was recommended? This is good when you have, for example, Cilium networking, but there, Google actually recently also open sourced a project which is using Cert Manager and basically creating FQDN network policy. Very similar to what Cilium is doing. So like I can share the link as well. It's open source project and you can try it as an alternative to Cilium, but I'll have also Cilium approach, which is, pretty solid and a lot of people using it for filtering.
I want to throw this out there too. I mean, there's other CNI projects that have some levels of like egress or whatever. If you think of like, I think Calico, I think as well have some solutions that also do this. So, from a being agnostic perspective, but like again, in terms of experience, I've just seen this. Cilium like especially like just taking off in terms of what is required, especially from an egress and ingress and flow and all that.
I think Calico might be adding eBPF as well, right? So maybe that's why it popped up. But before, Calico never had this support, so it's like it was pretty unique for Cilium for a long time.
Right.
Like if Calico is adding eBPF support, then I think they can also use QDN based network policies.
Yep.
I think the other thing is, like with a lot of the networking solutions, there's other solutions at different layers. Like if you're using a service mesh, certain service meshes will support like restricting egress traffic as well. So Istio, for instance.
A lot of networking questions today.
Yeah. Gotta brush up here.
In one of the products, we actually have integration with NSXT, which is a CNI, and that actually implements sort of egress shaping. So specifically, it can do things like SNAT. So you could actually look for solutions which can actually provide you with some sort of SNAT capabilities. So if it is, say, something like a layer 7 communication that you're looking at, then obviously using a sort of web proxy might be one of the ways, right? But if you're trying to replace that with more of a layer 4 thing, then you would obviously have to look for a solution that provides you with some way of doing SNATing. So with NSXT, there used to be one in like VMware actually has a CNI now called Antria, which also has egress policies that you can actually explore.
All righty. We have attacked the network policy in the network today. This panel is on fire today. All right. We have a question from Babasasidar. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Can I install or configure service mesh locally to Kubernetes, or should I need a cloud environment? I think, again, you can do this on, I think there's examples as well on a lot of them. Like if you think about, like, I'll mention like Solo.io or like Linkerd or others, right? You can run those, locally on like Minikube or K3S and all of those. A lot of them, even in their quick starts, talk about that. So please, take a look at the various quick starts that are out there. It's just running a YAML, right? And we all know that, YAML should be able to be deployed on any, kind of, God willing, API-centric Kubernetes deployment. So we should be good there. But yeah, that's probably my high-level answer there. Istio, yes, I'm sorry. I did not throw Istio out there. My apologies, kind sir. Archie?
Yeah, I mean, you can install obviously anywhere. Like in case of Istio, and I'm sure Linkerd has the same, like you can install Linkerd anywhere. Like there's no really need to have cloud provider in the mix. However, obviously cloud providers probably, if you're running on specific cloud provider, it's better to look the documentation for that specific cloud provider, because there might be some features that they're using, like maybe monitoring or tracing, like which is like specific to that cloud provider. So it could be an interesting approach. For example, if you use it on Google Cloud, because I can stick up for Google, we have right now managed control plane of Istio, so you'll definitely need to follow the instruction from GCP if you want to have managed control plane. But like if you just want to install Istio for your personal interest and maybe try, like I would recommend in case of Istio to use just to go to the documentation and follow the instructions how to install with operator or Helm chart. Should be pretty straightforward.
And Babu, I think it seems like by your questions, I love the fact that you're getting in there, right? All of us in this panel had the same, like, when we started, it was like, oh, we had the questions about like how to do, like, getting started with like Hardway or spinning up a cluster, and you're asking these questions because you're trying to experiment. Do those experiments, because that's how we all got better at this. It's just breaking stuff, right? So don't be afraid to do those things and ask the questions as you have. So it's great. All right.
And
let's see.
The pronunciation was perfect, actually, Babu.
I was? Okay. Phew.
Yeah,
all
perfect.
Right. You got to keep me. You got to keep me in check over
I'm
here.
just keeping you honest. Yeah.
That's why you're the anchor, dude. That's why you're the anchor. All right. So let me see here. So let's talk about the 1.22 release with some of the deprecated API, I guess, and those types of things. David, I mean, you want to kind of lead this discussion here?
Sure. So we're approaching the 1.22 release, which I think is due in the first week of August. And as with every third release, there's the removal of deprecated APIs. So I don't think the deprecations should be a surprise to anyone, but there are a substantial number of API versions disappearing from the API server in this next release. Let's see, I pulled a list up. This is not coming from the top of my head, but we are losing access to validating webhook configurations and mutating webhook configurations in the V1 Beta 1 namespace, as well as custom resource definitions, API service, token reviews, subject access reviews, local subject access reviews, self-subject access reviews, certificate sign-in requests, leases, and ingress. All those are disappearing from V1 Beta 1, and people will and need to upgrade to V1 there. So that's quite a lot of things disappearing, right?
Ingress, I think, is pretty critical for everyone. if you didn't update it, you might end up like having a lot of fun and outages in your environment.
So there's a deprecated API migration guide that I just put in channel. That was something I think that I think Kat Cosgrove put that up as well. It's something that's just to make sure that everybody knows about. It's really cool. Again, I shout out yet again to the Kubernetes docs team. Fantastic. I mean, we're in lockstep in terms of these, but people need to know about this to be able to, migrate things over and just be aware of these things, right? And plan accordingly.
Yeah, and there's it's mentioned in the guide, but there's a kube control plugin, kube control convert, which is an official plugin that's being maintained to help migrate all of your older YAML manifests into the newer format. And then the migration guide, there's also a bunch of flags that you can pass to your API server to explicitly disable those namespace versions as well to make sure things don't break. And mad props to Kyverno and OPA as well, who have policies to monitor all of this stuff. So you should have enough visibility into your cluster, and just make sure you check those resources. Anyone else get any other tips for API deprecation?
Read the warnings when you're doing kubectl apply. Don't be a developer and ignore all the warnings.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, because I was like, I was ignoring those warnings, and then suddenly one day I started one of the beta releases, and boom, like nothing is working. Oops. So yeah, especially for the ingress, because the spec is changing a bit. It's not just like changing the kind, because the spec is changing a bit. I think that would impact a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
So heed those warnings. You all don't, time out on that. All right. Do we have any more questions, or can we wrap it up for today?
There's a message from Barco if he wants to talk about that, about Helm. I wasn't aware of that. Maybe you want to share some details?
Yeah, I just saw this last night. Apparently there was a CVE that could leak some, I guess, your Helm repository username passwords to different domains and different repositories. I guess it was patched last week. I don't know if it was discovered last week, but it's been already patched in the latest version. So if you're using that, and especially if you're using private repositories or repositories that have credentials, you should probably look into upgrading Helm.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
All righty. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up and say thank you to the following companies for supporting the community with developer volunteers. Our STEAM panel was made up of Skyscanner, Equinix Metal, Google, VMware, Sysdig, and Carta. Did I miss any companies, y'all? We got everything here. I need Archie's background for me to know exactly what's going on, where he works, and stuff like this. All right. Lastly, everyone, feel free to hang out in office hours afterwards. We'll be in there for a little bit answering questions. And if the other channels are busy for you and looking for a friendly home, you're more than welcome to pull up chair and hang out in office hours. We really appreciate it. Again, we do this for the community, and we appreciate all that. Appreciate all the questions. And again, I love the fact that some of the folks are getting started. They're trying to understand what's going on. We all were, beginners, and so really, that's what we do this for, is to make sure we have other folks that will be contributing back to the community as well. So we'll be back at the same time next month. Again, the truce will be in effect for me and my enemy raw code. Oh, by the way, raw code this week on Friday, Cloud Native TV is going to have OPA. So that's, and the show is called LGTM. Great show. If you haven't checked it out, Cloud Native TV, follow. We'll be back at the same time next month. Until then, have a great month. Love you all. See you all soon.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody. Talk soon.